Ready? Okay. All right. So I'd like to officially welcome everybody, Mayor Kevin Davis, to the City of Brantford Mayor's Economic Task Force. This is our second full meeting, and the normal order of business would be taking the roll call, but I understand that the Deputy Clerk has that information, so we won't do that. So I'll just move into some of the rules of procedure in respect to today's proceeding, because it is virtual. So there are a few procedural rules to assist us in our meeting. All members should be muted during the meeting except when you're speaking. All web cameras should remain turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need arise from questions from members. And please, any member who wish to speak to a matter, please press that raise hand button on the participant list screen, bottom right-hand corner, or if you're on phone, by pressing *9. Staff will lower your hand when you've been recognized and you've had your speaking opportunity. In the event of a connection or service interruption, we adjourn for up to 15 minutes to reestablish the connection. If we can't, the meeting will then be adjourned automatically. Voting will be conducted through general consensus, so I simply ask if anybody generally is in the negative. That way it's much easier to keep track of it. And so please note that this is being streamed live to the City of Brantford's YouTube channel and will be available for public viewing afterwards. The other point is, we know we have Minister Phillips coming on at 3, and depending on how we make out with our agenda, we may be able to deal with everything else before 3 o'clock. And if we do take an adjournment, please do not move out of Zoom. Just stay in Zoom. You can move away from your camera and do whatever, and then come back at 3. If we haven't got our business finished before 3, then we'll reconvene after the minister's presentation and his session. So do any of the members have a pecuniary interest that they'd like to declare? And if you do, then you'd raise your hand. Not seeing anybody. Councillor Ratley, I think, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are 4 participants with Brantford panelists, and for the sake of Dr. Abanki, if Corey, if you could explain how to change that to the individual's name. So we've got Cindy,
Heather,
and
Fabrizio, I think.
And
no, Fabrizio's got his up.
Oh, is that I can't see who it is. Tony?
Sure, Councillor Ratley. So if you just hover over your name where it says Brantford panelist, then you'll right click and choose rename, and then put in your name and your title. Thank you.
Okay. I think we have one more.
Yeah. I think it's Tony Toma.
I believe it is. It is Tony.
There you go. Oh,
well, he's working on it. There we go.
There we go. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
So before we get into the order of business beyond the declaration of pecuniary interest, just want to confirm then that nobody has a pecuniary interest they wish to make, and you'd actually raise your hand if you do. Just double checking through the screens, not seeing anybody. Okay, so as I said earlier, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, will be joining us at 3 p.m. And so we'll try and conclude our business otherwise before then. And I'm going to ask that, I guess to be very technical, clerk staff tell me we have to have a motion to defer agenda item 3.1 to 3 p.m. And that's the meeting with Minister Phillips, and suspend the 10-minute time limit for presentations. That's because at the city we have a time limit for presentations of 10 minutes. So the motion would read that agenda item 3.1 be deferred until 3 p.m. and that the designated speaking time of 10 minutes inclusive of questions be suspended to allow the Honorable Minister of Finance to address the task force without time constraint. Do I have a mover for that? Yes, Councillor Rutley, you're moving it. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah. I think Councillor McCurry had his hand up as well.
Councillor
That's
McCurry, you
correct.
second that? All right. And so any discussion on that? Not seeing any. And so I'll ask anybody who is not in favor of this to please raise their hand. And just raise it like that. Not seeing any raised hands, that's unanimous. So we've done that. We have the minutes for the Economic Task Force meeting of May 19th. Assuming everybody's had a chance to review those minutes, are there any proposed corrections? And if so, just physically raise your hand. And I'll go through the gallery. Not seeing any raised hands. If I can have a mover and adopter then that the minutes from the May 19th, 2020 meeting be adopted. Moved by Barbara, seconded by Rose Scaloli. And do I see any discussion on that? If not, anyone who is opposed to approving the minutes, please raise your hand. Not seeing any raised hands, that's unanimous. Now, before we get into the discussion of the Economic Recovery Action Plan, I'd like to thank Dr. Bannicky for her participation in the task force. She's currently a non-voting member of the task force unless the membership's amended by Brantford City Council. And so I'm asking if a member of the task force would wish to move a motion to recommend to council to amend the membership of the Economic Recovery Task Force to include Dr. Bannicky or her designate. Yes, Rose is moving that. It's seconded by Heidi Northwood. And the motion is that the Economic Task Force terms of reference be amended to include Dr. Bannicky or her designate as a voting member. And this will come to council on June 23rd for its endorsement. Until that time, Dr. Bannicky will be in as an observer, can participate, unfortunately just can't vote. So all those who are in favor, I'll ask for a vote in favor of this. Just raise your hands. Good, I'm seeing lots of raised hands. Anybody opposed? Seeing none. It's very important we have Dr. Bannicky, especially some of our recommendations do relate to the health unit and would be much improved with participation of the health unit. I'd also like to make a note that MP Phil McColeman sends his regrets for this meeting. However, he did share some information regarding federal infrastructure funds. And following today's meeting, Corey will send out some additional information on the Investing Canada programs. And MP McColeman's office also submitted a request to the Library of Parliament for further research into alternative funding opportunities that may be available. Once that information is received, we'll add it into the task force recommendation. Now, before I ask Kevin, what we're now going to do is move on to the draft Economic Recovery Action Plan that was prepared by your working group. And I'll ask Kevin Finney, our Director of Economic Development and Tourism, to give us an overview. But before doing that, especially for the viewers who may not be as familiar as we are to the process. So since our last Economic Recovery Task Force meeting well over 2 weeks ago, there was a working group formed of 10 members of the task force. And we, working with staff from the Economic Development Department, prepared a draft economic recovery plan, which we're looking at this afternoon. And that was reviewed twice by the working group. The working group met twice. We also received written input from members of the task force. We also considered the comments members of the task force made at our last meeting. And of course, we also considered information that came to us through the city's website by interested members of the public. Today, we're going to, after Mr. Finney has given us an overview, I'll then ask if anybody has any questions or wish to make any comments, and we'll try and do that through raising your hand through that participant chat box. Once we've received all the comment today, the working group will be meeting again next week, June 10th, to consider all of the comments by the members of the task force today. And certainly you can submit further comments by writing if you're a member of the task force, and also if you're a member of the public, you can continue to provide your input through the city's website. June 10th, the working group will meet again to consider all of the further information we've received, There likely will be further amendments and refinements of the task force recovery plan. We as a group will then meet again on June the 19th to consider the final draft of this recovery plan and recommending it for adoption by City Council at its meeting on June 23rd. Once City Council's approved the economic recovery action plan, that of course will not be the end. That's really just the beginning, because it'll be full of steps for City Council, members of the City Hall staff, and of course all our other interested partners and stakeholders. We're gonna have a number of different goals and tasks that will have to quickly be accomplished. So the meeting of June 23rd council meeting is really just the beginning. And then of course we'll be reviewing the plan again later in the summer, when we will then review the current situation economically in the city of Brantford and determine what, and also the success we've had to then in implementing the recommended terms of the action plan, and then obviously revise it and consider what more we need to do at that time. So at that, I'll then ask Mr. Finney, if you could please give us an overview, recognizing that although most of us, I'm sure all of us have actually read it, there'll be some members of the public who are tuning in that I would probably appreciate an outline and overview.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I do get into the document, I'd just like to acknowledge the other staff that have helped me with this document. It certainly hasn't been an independent effort. Over the course of the past 2 weeks, it has been a lot of heavy lifting behind the scenes. So I'm very appreciative of the staff that we do have on our team that have helped me along this path. So with that, I'm not going to go through the document. Rather, I will call it a summary. The working group members have seen almost all of this content, just not in the polished document form that's before you today. So with that, again, if we start with the background and objectives, again, it speaks to how this task force was originally formed through the council resolution, as well as its mandate and some of the key objectives that were laid out as part of that resolution. So to quickly go through the objectives again, the key focus here is to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19, so health and safety being a #1 priority as that underlying principle for the plan. We then move into building the relationship through this task force and how we can work collaboratively to find solutions to recovery. Engaging with the stakeholders, as Mayor Davis mentioned, the community at large and the businesses impacted by this is a key point of this task force, and incorporated into the plan moving forward. And finally, the action plan itself. So that's the key deliverable here in my mind. And that's what I'll get into a bit more detail as we go down this path here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So again, the situational analysis really sets the stage of where we're at, starting at the national level. We then dive into some of the provincial statistics with respect to GDP and the impact, unemployment rates. And finally, we really kind of focus on the local impacts as a city. So again, we've brought in the health unit stats, so the COVID-19 cases to date, the recoveries, how we're faring very well. I also make mention of the fact that there hasn't been any outbreaks in the retirement and long-term care facilities. And again, how we're really acting collaboratively to flatten that curve across the community, and how we've been very successful in doing so to date. So if we think of the economy overall, we've actually brought in unemployment data to, paint the picture that we were doing very well as a community prior to COVID coming. One of the lowest unemployment rates across the entire country. Building permits, housing starts, they are well above normals that we've seen in past years. So it was painting the picture that we're on course for a very strong 2020. Post-COVID, again, as a lot of you are aware, unemployment figures came out today. They shot up another 2%. So based on May stats, we're sitting now at 11.3. Last month, we were at 9.4. So almost an entire 2-point increase in terms of unemployment. And again, then we actually drill down into the industries affected the most. And as a lot of you can attest, tourism sector, and especially the downtown core itself, and the retail establishments, retail across the city in general for that matter. But again, the downtown core and tourism definitely hardest hit. So we've broken the sectors down in terms of risk and identified low, medium, and high. And that'll allow us to reach out to these sectors and the businesses affected with priority. So if you look at the pie chart on page 11, it kind of delineates, high, medium, and low. Again, if you look at this, green is good. So, 65% of the workforce is low impact in terms of COVID. But again, when you look at the higher risk, you're up around that 27%. So there's definitely a quarter of the local industries that are affected heavily from this pandemic. And then we get into the municipal measures to date. So again, I thought this was important to let everybody know that the city is also feeling the pressures of this pandemic. So we talk about some of the relief measures that have been put in place to date by the municipality, as well as the deficit that we're projecting if we look out further into 2020, and how we've tried to mitigate that as an organization moving forward. So we don't, well, we can't technically have a deficit, but some of the measures have been put in place and approved by City Council to ensure we don't have a deficit. So if we look into the recovery timelines, again, very much the stage approach. And again, a lot of this does mirror the provincial directives that are coming down and the announcements that are made when the next phase of reopening will occur. So if we do look at it from a phase by phase approach, obviously phase one, very much that reaction and response phase, a lot of the data collection and stuff with respect to the business impact survey we've done to date, and some of those initial campaigns with the Brantford Together campaign, which will continue on as we look into phase two and phase three. But again, it just kind of sets that stage and let us understand what businesses are facing. Looking into phase two, again, this is where the action plan will come into play. So if we look into the next 12-month time period, this is where we're going to be. This is phase number 2. And again, how this reopening will occur, the mandatory health and safety guidelines, and then those sectors, again, that I mentioned before, be it tourism or retail, how we concentrate our efforts on assisting those businesses as they reopen and to ensure they meet those health and safety guidelines. Phase 3, again, this would be beyond the 12-month time frame. Again, these are very loose timelines, as everyone can appreciate. This is evolving by the day, and we're not exactly sure when that finish line will be. But if we look further down, intermediate, long term, just so the economy stabilizes when we get back to kind of that new normal or where we were pre-COVID. So if we're jumping into the action plan, again, I know the task force was privy to that spreadsheet before the working group, as Mayor Davis mentioned, has had 2 chances to look at that chart, and we've refined it. So the key areas of concern still remain the same. The top 8, again, health and safety by far, we're hearing across the board is #1 priority. And secondly, I would again say that support local campaign. So the key things that have changed on this spreadsheet, you'll now notice that some of the programs and initiatives have changed based on input, as well as the lead agencies. So staff have tried to identify, again, in collaboration with the working group, who's going to be responsible for these initiatives as we look down the road here. A lot of these will be led by economic development tourism staff, but some of those other lead organizations with respect to, let's say, workforce development, Danette and her group with workforce planning is already doing their own recovery initiative, so we would be supporting what they're already doing. And again, the recommended actions. So we continue to update these as announcements are made, by the province as well as the federal government. So you'll notice a lot of new links to resources online, as well as new programs or initiatives that they have started. So this is very much evolving as we get word from the upper tier government. On that, Mr. Mayor, I think I'll leave it at that. And again, happy to answer any questions from the task force.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. And again, many thanks to you and your staff. Did the lion's share of the work on this. You've done an excellent job in putting this together and a lot of relevant information. And I'd also say that, I mean, some of these action steps, some of them we're already doing. Those that the city can do and that we can do even before city council approval is needed. And it's just because some of them we can do that. So it's not as if nothing's not being done. It's given us a lot of good ideas, some of which we're already moving on. So now I'm going to throw the floor open. So this is to, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to add something, suggest an amendment, or anything you want to say in respect to this recovery action plan. And so I'm going to throw the floor open, and I'd ask if you would push that raise hand button. Or if you're not good with that, you can just raise your hand and I'll catch you if I'm. Oh, I do see Councillor Utley. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I'd like to add my thanks to Kevin and his team for doing a great job, very precise, and lots of good information there. I don't know if it's appropriate at this time or later, but I would certainly like us to consider putting some quotes from this group, if you want to, within that report as well, like how you found the experience, or what did you learn from it, what your suggestions are. I just think that would be useful to the readers. We know what's going on because we attend these meetings, but the people that will see this report. I think it would be useful to have a rounded feeling of how this group feels about the process that we went through. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Rose Sicoli, you've got your hand raised.
Just a quick question. Is the public survey still going on, and where would we find that? Because I had a look through our Facebook page and I could not locate that survey anywhere to try to share it. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to whichever staffer would perhaps know the answer to that.
Thank you, Rose. Mr. Finney, can you answer that for us? Because yes, it's still open.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to Rose. Yeah, it certainly is still open. It is housed on advantagebrantford.ca. And when you hit that page, the first, the key image is actually a link to the COVID support pages. So you can click that and make it to the survey. It's still open. We've received 54 responses to date. And as you know, we'll be bringing back those responses to the working group so that they're aware of what we're hearing. And again, I'll reiterate the fact that, again, the key themes that we're hearing align with the plan that we have currently developed. Health and safety, shop local. Yes.
Anything else, Rose? No, okay. I think I saw Danette Dalton. I see your hands raised.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Davis, to Kevin Finney. Just some thoughts regarding starting on page 16, where you have the action plan noted. There are some things here that I've noticed that the Workforce Planning Board of Grand Erie can assist with, because we've either already started some work in that realm, or we will be. So I can certainly try and rhyme all of those off now, or I can maybe just take that up with Kevin after the meeting. And then you can assess whether or not they would be helpful. It would be helpful to mention Workforce Planning Board under lead contact.
Yeah, I think we'll leave that to for Mr. Finney to follow up on. But, you know, Danette, you've raised a good question, which is this spreadsheet that is the action plan, the actual specific items that we hope to accomplish. There is what are called lead contacts. And so that'll be the agency that takes on the lion's share of the work set out in that part of the action plan. And we certainly invite any of our stakeholders and partners to sign on as lead contact, because our economic development department, of course, can't do everything. But so far, we've had great success in a number of our stakeholders and members coming forward and saying they're prepared to help. So it'd be great if you could follow up with Kevin on that. Now, next question. I think I saw Heidi Northwood raise her hand. Yes, Heidi. From Laurier University.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have actually a question about that column in the spreadsheet. But before I get there, I think this is a great, absolutely fantastic draft. So hats off to all of the members of the working group. It's really, really impressive. So I'm now thinking about those next steps if it were all to be approved and we move into enacting some of this stuff. Does it make sense? I noticed that in one of the, I believe it's under 4A, there's actually a primary, EDT, the economic development is listed as the primary contact. And it seemed, I just wondered whether it would make sense to have a lead contact and then separated out partners. Because I'm thinking about how often, if there's more than one lead contact, the dispersal of authority ends up meaning that no one quite knows who to talk to get it all going. So that was just a suggestion, a thought. Yeah.
Kevin Finney, can you answer that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Heidi, that's a good point. And again, once we get approval from council, I foresee staff kind of setting up their own little side groups for a lot of these initiatives. And that's where we kind of identify those leads and support. So certainly hear you on that one. We can definitely address it after it's approved.
Okay. Heidi, anything else?
Fantastic. And I will reach out to you, Kevin, to let you know where Laurier would be a good partner for all of the different initiatives. Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. Tony, I think I saw your hand up, and then Linda Parker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to Heidi's point, we are, in many of our students are international students that go to the Brantford campus, and some of those students may not be showing up until January. They may be starting their curriculum from their home country in the fall and then arriving probably in January, we hope, physically. But there are some that may be able to come, but they will need to be in quarantine for a certain period of time before they can physically start to take campuses. And I'm sure Heidi would have the same issues for her students as well, especially the international ones. Now, we have roughly about 1,000 of those students in Brantford, and most of them are international students. They are good community members. They pay rent on time to their landlords, and they contribute to the community and to the restaurants and other activities in the area. So I think we need to make sure that we continue to keep you abreast of the status of those international students so that the community can prepare.
Point. Excellent point. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. And I'll now move to Linda Parker from the Six Nations Polytech. Then you just have to unmute yourself. There you go. Oh,
There we go.
You're
Thank you,
on.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, awesome work, Kevin, to you and your team and the working groups. I just wanted to add under 6A, perhaps just an update on the broadband piece, because Ontario did just announce within the last few days about improving broadband and cell phone service. So just another, I guess, point of reference or potential fund for that initiative.
yeah, Kevin, do you have a little bit of an update for us? Because that's very timely what Linda's telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question, Linda. So I was in touch with Janice yesterday, and Matt was also clipped in on an email. So we submitted an expression of interest to the CenGen broadband rural broadband program last week, and identified Six Nations and Woodland, as well as potentially Brantford Power as partners for that project. If we do get shortlisted, we're definitely going to pursue this. So I'm well aware of the program, and I'm hoping we get some traction here and we can help get some more broadband service out to the remote areas.
Okay,
Thank you,
just one
Linda.
final
Anything else?
comment.
Sure. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, our IT manager, he's actually looking to do community work within Six Nations as well. So maybe at some point I can connect you with Nathan. So as I said, I know there's things already on the go, and Matt, maybe you're working with Nathan on starting, a Six Nations initiative for broadband as well. So there may be some legwork that's already done that could save some time.
Thank you, Linda. Heather Vanner. Heather, I'm pretty sure you weren't just adjusting the camera. I think you were trying to raise your hand.
Nope, just adjusting the camera.
Oh, just adjusting the camera. Okay. David Prank, Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, my lot of great pieces in there where the chamber either is already working with ECDEV or on our own to plug in. So excited about that. The one piece that's affecting obviously my participation today that I think has a space in maybe community health and safety is the childcare component. I know I'm not able to participate fully today because I've got that obligation on my end. So I think there's maybe an opportunity, and I can flesh out the idea in a little bit more detail about, I mean, it's a business piece, but it impacts parents' ability to fully integrate into the workforce, whether it's working from home, because that's still a challenge, or going into a workplace. And it's tied hand in hand with the school environment, obviously, which is out of our purview. But I think there's still an opportunity to pay some commentary to the need for safe childcare options, whether they're in school or preschool age children. And I mean, it's a broader issue outside of the COVID situation anyway. But I know from my personal experience today, unless the economy can't get back to full strength unless the children are back in the school in a safe manner, and that includes children that are in a preschool age as well. So I'll try and put some more commentary to that and send it over to Kevin.
Thank you, David. Anybody else? Any other comment? Oh, yes, Maria Fortuna.
Hi there.
Maria's from the Hamilton
I
Halton Brant
just
Regional
wanted-
Tourism
oh,
Association.
sorry, I jumped the gun. Thank you. I just wanted to suggest on page 20, I just quickly looked through it. So lots of great recommendations here. Certainly we've been working with Tourism Brantford and around the local focus of spending to support business operators. Under the recommended actions, I would just suggest maybe there's also training that could be provided. We've been working with other locales within my region to support local business operators with training in terms of readiness to open, whether that would be a help to the Brantford local community as well.
Thank you, Maria. Staff are noting that down. Councillor Utley, did you raise your hand? Did you want to make a second comment?
Please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the chart for the, oh gosh, it's gone. There we go. The chart for the breakdown of the economic landscape, the top three in red, accommodation, food services, culture, recreation, and wholesale and retail. And correct me if I'm wrong, they seem to be jobs at the lower end of the income level. And also probably people that have limited skills to work in other sectors of the community. And that represents, the total there represents about 21,000 employees. And I think that, these people are struggling already, I'm sure. And I wonder if we could, some way of funding some upgrading training for them that would help them with, sure it's going to be a slightly new economy, that they could work in other sectors of the city. So I'm just throwing that out there, that I just felt, it's the people at the bottom end of the rung that are struggling the most and continue to struggle unless we give them a leg up. So I'll just throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. I believe Rose Sicoli, Brantford Real Estate Association, would like to make another comment.
I actually just had a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Maria. When you say training, what specifically are you saying? Training like health and safety, PPE, or training in a different scope?
Do I directly reply? I'm not sure.
Go ahead. It's a little
Sorry.
unorthodox according to city procedure, but this is a task force and it's the mayor's task force, so I determine the rules. So
Okay, thank you.
ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure I follow proper protocol. So with the social distance requirements that are in place right now, there's some innovation that's going on around customer service, what types of things you can consider in terms of setting up your business to engage with the customer in this new setting. Also, there's a variety of checklists that are evolving right now. So working with the various sectors to identify the appropriate checklists to help them with their preparation. So those have been the types of virtual workshops that we've been working on with other areas. Does that respond reply to the question?
I see Rose shaking her head. I think it does.
Well, I was just wondering if it ties into item 2E, where we establish training. for health and safety and PPE and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's a
So
combination
it should,
with that.
okay.
So-
Great. So any other questions, comments? Go ahead and raise your hand physically if I can. Yes, Fabrizio.
Yeah, just joining comment from Councillor Attlee, because of course, if we can provide to people that lost their job training, on the other hand, we have large manufacturers like we are that are always starving for skilled labor, skilled people. So this could be really a win-win approach. So from my perspective, is something that will be very, very welcome. And if we can participate in this as well in some discussions is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Tony, I see you've raised your hand. Tony from Conestoga College. Thank you, Fabrizio.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I know Conestoga as well as the Laurier are working with people to provide academic upgrading that want to maybe switch their professions and maybe go into more formal post-secondary education, wherever that pathway may lead them. So there's one option there. At the Brantford Airport site, we are ramping up to start as early as mid-July for some of our construction trades. And I see Peter Vacano's on the line today. We are ramping up to finish off our heavy equipment construction program, to finish off those students who need to graduate, because those are the ones that that are driving the bulldozers and backhoes that will help the construction economy get back up and rolling soon. But we also offer a pre-apprenticeship program in electrical electricians and also automotive mechanics as well. We'd like to expand on that. So there's a few programs out there, and we're actually working with Brantford St. Leonard's Society on some specialized programming as well out of that site. So those are all types of programs that are available for people that want to switch careers going into the future. So that's out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tony. I have David Prang next, and then Lily, I think I saw you raise your hand. So we'll go to David Prang first. David from Chamber of Commerce.
I think I might have hit that by mistake, and I'll blame my children on that one.
Okay. All right. So Lily Lumsden from the YMCA.
One of the things that I would suggest that we look at is the province of Ontario did establish an economic recovery task force as well. And what I'm thinking, and I was just trying to look up to see where they are, but in terms of retraining and getting people back to work, I would suspect that over the course of the next few months, that the Ministry of Labor and Skills Development, which funds the Employment Ontario job programs, will be implementing some retraining programs or different types of funding. So things like Second Career, which is a program that currently exists that pays for people who are on EI to go back to school and get some retraining for a second career. They might shift money around to help to make it more accessible, change some of the guidelines, just because they know that economic recovery will be important and that they have a big part to play in this. So it might be worthwhile kind of checking into that task force at the provincial level, because a number of ministries will be working together on that to help with economic recovery. So just a suggestion.
Thank you, Lily. Councillor, did you raise your hand again?
Sure did.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to share a message I received from a salon operator. And this individual is, like most salon operators, desperate to get back to work, and even more desperate, their clients that want to, have their coiffures done. But anyhow, this individual seemed to be very creative and said, I know I can put safeguards in place at my place of establishment, limit the number of customers that can come in to the salon, and abide by all the protocols, which other businesses are doing as well right now. And I'll give one example with golf carts. It was one golfer to a cart. Now there's a barrier built between the driver and passenger, so we can get two on the cart now. So I think there's a lot of individuals, business owners, that know they can safeguard themselves and their customers, but they don't have a voice to get it out there. And I advised this one individual. Well, I asked this one individual if she was a member of the chamber, and she said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Well, give Dave Prang a call." Sorry, Dave. Give Dave a call anyway, and he may be able to assist, or at least be a pair of ears for you. But this is just one example of many small business operators that maybe don't belong to a chamber or an association, and are struggling, and they're digging into their savings to pay the rent on their establishment. So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dr. Abanki, if that could be discussed with the Brant County Health Unit, or at least who can they go to say, here's my idea? Could that idea come to this group, or should it go to the AOC? And I'm just looking for a little bit of feedback here on that. And I say there could be a lot of other businesses out there that are going through the same circumstances and are willing to do whatever's necessary to make their employment safe.
Yeah, so Dr. Bannick can probably add to what I'm going to say, but so to be clear, this is not a city decision. It's not a decision of the any local committee or even the local Department of Health, Public Health Unit. The reason why salons are closed is that they're listed in the provincial declaration, some of the emergency orders that have been made. And so even if an individual can demonstrate that they can meet all of the physical distancing requirements, we have no power to give them an exemption, as much as we might want to. But I would say to that business owner, I mean, it's great you're thinking about it, because you are going to be allowed to open, and we've heard from the provincial government, I think today or yesterday, it could be as early as next week or the following week. I mean, that's the decision of the provincial government and the provincial public health authorities based on the statistical data and their analysis of the health situation. So, so their time and effort is actually well spent getting themselves ready for the provincial government, giving them the option, giving them the ability to carry on their business. And another possible proposal being discussed provincially is regional reopening, such as some areas being able to open, going to stage 2 faster than other areas such as the GTA. And so I hope, Dr. Bannicky, that I've given a correct answer.
Sorry, just coming off mute. Sounds okay? Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, that is the correct answer. And as you said, I would encourage all the small business owners or any business owner to be forward thinking and start preparing for reopenings as they come. As you said, it's under the provincial emergency directives. So unfortunately, I don't have any specific powers to reopen, especially individual ones right now. But there is an increasing number of guidance, very specific, like for personal service settings, such as hair salons and nail salons, things like that. There's lots of literature and guidance documents coming up. So either especially on the Ministry of Labor site, but also some through the Ministry of Health, but also if they email into the COVID email for the Brant County Health Unit, or even call our COVID hotline, we can help direct them to some of those resources for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also Councillor Atley, there is in our action plan, it's a large part of it, which is helping to educate and assisting businesses that are going to be reopening and to meet the public health requirements. That's a big piece of this, is education and helping one another. Fabrizio talked about it last time we were together, that even some of the larger industries have done a lot of that already amongst themselves, and hoping we can draw upon some of their experience and their knowledge of what is best practices. So it's a lot of this is going to be helping one another, but it is going to happen at some point, and the more one does as a business person preparing for it, then the quicker they can safely reopen once the provincial government has given the go-ahead. So, any other raised hands? I'm just going back. I have to go through two. Yes, Matt Jameson from Six Nations.
Yeah, hi. My question is actually for Kevin Finney. Looking at the report, I know, Kevin, you reported that there was a 2% uptake in unemployment rates. I'm also looking on, I think this, I'm not sure what page this is, where there's a summary of by sector, table 2, I guess it is, where there's been some assumptions around the 12-month risk profile for job loss. I'm just wondering if there's any data based on the most recent unemployment numbers that just came out, that 2% uptick, does it fit within your assumptions, or are we surprised by any of those layoffs relative to what we would consider a low risk in the next 12 months? Because I see that, for example, manufacturing represents 19% of the workforce. Does that unemployment rate uptick influence the assumptions around that figure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Matt. Great question, Matt. I don't think there's data available at that level. And again, there's a lot of assumptions assumed here, and again, with those risk categories. So yeah, we can definitely look into it. I don't think it's available personally.
Any other questions, comments, recommendations? Seeing none. All right, so we are at 20 after 2. We'll reconvene at about 10 to 3. Okay, so about 2:45 you come back on. So please do not disconnect. Feel free to walk away from your computer screen, but please keep it on, because if you get out of Zoom and come back in, it creates problems for the staff. So I'd ask if you please be kind enough to do that. Don't forget, if there is something you wanted to say and maybe it comes to you after we finish the meeting or on the weekend, please feel free to send Kevin Finney or Corey an email setting out some of your additional thoughts or comments. All right, so we'll reconvene then at about 2:45.
Mr. Mayor, I think
yes?
Kevin Finney had his hand up. Or were you waving goodbye?
Well, Kevin, you should be pushing the raised hand button. Go ahead.
I'm still figuring out this Zoom platform, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, again, we had everyone together here, just wanted to let everyone know that as one of these recommendations from a municipal standpoint, it's the idea of expanding outdoor patios and whatnot for the restaurants and bars and creating these creative places, parklets. We did open up a survey online as of yesterday to get feedback from the business community. So that's available again, it's on Advantage Brantford. So if you do know anybody that might have interest in that, I definitely encourage them to fill out the survey so that we can incorporate that into the staff report and the recommendation that would come back to the June 23rd council meeting.
Good. Thanks for that comment, Kevin. All right, seeing no more raised hands. So we'll reconvene in under half an hour, around 2:45. Thanks. And don't disconnect from Zoom, please. Hi, everyone. Mayor Davis. We're waiting for our MPP to come on in about 4 or 5 minutes. And then, so far as we know, the minister is still on schedule for 3 o'clock. I can tell you that we did receive about 14 questions. So I've gone through it. And what I've done is I'm trying to make sure everybody who asked to ask a question will have their question asked. And I've tried to sort them through those that are going through an order that has them in the order of those that are probably most relevant to and direct related to our Economic Recovery Task Force plan. Hopefully we'll have time to get to most of them. Just so you know that the minister has said that he will be giving us some general comments till about 3:10, 3:15, and then I will have about 15 minutes for questions, the ones that I've got. If for some reason I'm able to get through those, we'll then just fill the floor open to questions. But I think he has until about 3:30. And their schedules are very precise, as you can well imagine. So, but I think we'll find it very useful. So we're just waiting for Mr. Bowman to join us in a few minutes. And then we'll carry on for what I'm sure will be a very interesting half hour. And just a reminder, so the next working group meeting is June 10th, next Wednesday at 2:30, and our next task force meeting is June 16th at 2:30 p.m. And that will likely be our last meeting before the summer, and then reconvening likely sometime in August. And during that summer period, a lot of us will have tasks that we'll each have to be performing. So. Oh, one thing I'd like to also say is, so Mark Lazenby from RMBC, he wasn't able to join us. He's our banking representative because for some reason, I guess RBC is not allowing them to participate using RBC computers on Zoom. And he did suggest that he's had some preliminary discussions with Ballard's Accounting, some potential advice-focused services we could provide to current or potential businesses and not-for-profits. This would be around the business owner receiving accounting and banking advice and suggestions in a one-stop, no-cost manner. Our plan is to follow up with Enterprise Brant on this concept. Hope to be able to provide additional information in this regard by email next week, so we'll then be able to incorporate that into the task force action plan. So that's great news. Mr. Boma, where are you?
Mr. Mayor? Hello, sir. You're on mute. The MPP is going to be here very shortly, okay?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Milan.
Very welcome.
It's been a very interesting day for me. Lots of ministers. We had a LUMCO meeting this morning, virtual.
Oh, wow.
We had Minister Elliott, Christine Elliott, Minister
Great.
Steve Clark, Mr. Lehman, Ministry of Long-Term Care. So that was quite
Minister
interesting.
Phillips, check mark.
So is Will pretty close to being our MPP, pretty close to coming in?
Yes, he is. Just bear with us.
I will. I guess I don't have any choice.
About 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Minister Phillips will join momentarily. Thank you.
So we'll do Will after.
MPP Bama is going to be logging in about 25 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Minister Phillips, thank you very much for joining us. Mayor Kevin Davis, it's a great pleasure and honor to have you here. And thank
Mr.
you very
Mayor.
much to our MPP for arranging this.
Well, I thank him as well. Will's a great colleague down here doing a great job. But Mr. Mayor, it's a pleasure to be with you. So thank you for taking the time. I know how busy that job is. So I appreciate your time and everybody else's time.
I expect not as busy as your job. So very quickly, we want to hear from you. So I'll very quickly give an introduction. We all know that Rod Phillips is the Minister of Finance. Ontario is currently the MPP for Ajax. And prior to that, he was the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Very quickly, he was chair of Post Media, Canada's largest news media corporation. Before that, chair of Affinity Canada. Before that, former president and CEO of the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation. And he's also served as chief of staff in the offices of the Minister of Labor, Elizabeth Whitmer, and the former mayor of Toronto, Mel Lastman. Ms. Phillips has an honors BA in political science and English from the University of Western Ontario and an MBA from Wilfrid Laurier University. We're very happy to hear that. Yay. I'd say this, I've met Minister Phillips several times through my association with the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, some in virtual, some in person. And I can tell you this, that sometimes I run to politicians, I know they pretend they're listening to me, but I know this with Minister Phillips, when you meet with him, he's a very good listener. You know he is actually listening to you, and the answers he gives are very honest and direct and straightforward. So Minister Phillips, thank you very much for being with us today. I understand you've got a group here representing a number of the organizations, agencies, and businesses in Brantford coming together with a recovery task force for our economy. So we're very interested in what you have to say to us generally in respect to your position as the Minister of Finance, and I understand you'd like about 10 or 15 minutes, kind of give us a general overview, followed by some questions we have for you.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, Your Worship. You mentioned that I worked for Mel Lastman, I think, and Mel Lastman, for those who might be a bit younger, might recall, was a mayor of North York, and then the mayor in the city of Toronto was amalgamated. And he used to have a line about mayors versus other politicians. He said, you know, we honor our cabinet ministers, we honor our MPPs, but we worship our mayors. And he always thought that was an important distinction to. So thank you, and through you to your council, thank you very much for the leadership that you and of course your administrators as well have shown through this most challenging of times from both a health perspective and an economic perspective. So thanks for being here and taking the time. Will Boma, I mentioned already off the top, Will is one of the great colleagues that I get to work with every day down at Queen's Park. So when I spoke to Will about the approach we were going to take, Will also, everybody should know, in addition to being significantly taller than me and almost everybody else I know, and therefore demanding respect, Will also chairs the caucus committee. We have a caucus structure within our government because it's very important to stay connected. So Will chairs the caucus committee that relates directly to finance. And so I work with Will quite closely and with a group of colleagues who have significant understanding from a business and economic background, as Will does, in terms of when we make decisions. Of course, we want to have the broadest possible understanding. So so I thank Will for that, and I thank him for organizing this this together today. I'll try to keep, Mr. Mayor, I'll try and keep it to about 10 minutes because I want to spend as much time listening, partly because you said that I do, and partly because I think that is just smart. Will and myself and the rest of my colleagues down here, and frankly, all of the MPPs, we've committed to try to, as we look to the impacts of COVID-19, we've committed as much as we can to try to work together as one legislature. And so one of the things that the Premier asked me to do was chair something called the Jobs and Recovery Committee of Cabinet, and it's a Cabinet committee with all the formality of that. But we asked all of the MPPs, including our own government MPPs, but also the opposition members, to go out and to get feedback in whatever variety of forms that they would do. And what that has turned into quite often is a call and a conversation just like this, where we are given the chance to tell people what we are trying to do, and then listen for a couple of things. And I'm going to spend some time today listening on that. So let me tell you now so you can perhaps think about it. We're listening to understand the impacts. Obviously, part of my focus is on reopening the economy safely, but we understand that the impacts go broader than just the economy. So the impacts of COVID-19, I think everybody would agree, if you're going to solve for a problem, if you're going to face a challenge, it's helpful to know the nature of that challenge. And we understand that it has some things that are very similar across many different geographies, but also things that are unique. And so we're asking for an understanding of impacts. We're also asking for an understanding of areas of support. We have been working very closely with the federal government and with local governments. And I think that's what's called for at a time of such a significant crisis globally and nationally and provincially. But we have tried very hard with the programs and services we've offered. I've worked very closely with Bill Morneau, who's the federal finance minister. So we are very open to getting feedback on what the governments, plural, have done, and try to, if there are gaps, look for how we can fill those gaps. But if there are things that that need to be done more clearly, I've been working with Minister Morneau on a number of the federal government programs. They've been very open to suggestions we've made. I can't say they've taken all of them. Similarly, with the many things we're doing provincially, about $17 billion worth of supports. We've been working with the federal government, but also with municipalities in terms of what are the things that we need to do to support that vital level of government. So, we're interested in any feedback on those programs and what's working, what's not, what you see as the gaps. Finally, on the opportunities and what is the things we need to do? What are the things we need to do as we go out and into the recovery? There was some positive news today. Some of you would have seen on the jobs front, where if you look at Canada in aggregate, there was actually some improvement in the job numbers, which of course have been terrible up until now. And for those of you who watched the US, you would have seen there was also a positive uptick then. Here in Ontario, because we are taking a very safe, steady approach to our reopening, the week that they take the data off of for job increases happened to be the week before we opened, as opposed to the province of Quebec, who opened May 1st. But we believe we will start to see now, as we're coming out, some improvements on that job front. But of course, we have a long way to come back. I've said this a number of times. There's no question in my mind that this is the most challenging health and economic situation in my lifetime. And we are going to have to come through it together. We are going to go through some challenging circumstances. We are going through challenging circumstances. People across the country are suffering as a result of job loss, clearly as a result of COVID. And we are going to have to find that new equilibrium in the economy. So we have committed, from a reopening point of view, to working through this in a staged way. We are now in stage 1. Early next week, we will announce moving into stage 2 of the reopening. That stage 2, again, we're working closely with our municipal partners so that they can prepare for what needs to be done moving into stage 2. But as with each of the 3 stages, there would be more businesses opening. There'll be direction from our Ministry of Labor and from our health tables about how they need to look at doing their businesses to protect individuals. We are monitoring closely the health reality from an acute care perspective, from a contact tracing perspective, and from a caseload perspective across the province. We've indicated that we will be looking at a regional this regionally, which is different. So that means that some regions could move at different rates than others, depending on what the reality is on the ground in those jurisdictions. And to be clear, regions could move back a stage into stage one were we to not have success. So it is absolutely in all of our interests to keep the great work that people are doing going forward in terms of, you know, washing our hands and social and physical isolating and the other things we're doing. So that announcement will come next week. We will then, you know, announce it. We will then move into that stage, and then finally again into a third stage, which would see the broader reopening. I'll say that the two things that I have been reminding everyone of, and it's because we've had the time to do a lot of very detailed analysis of what's been happening in jurisdictions around the world that are opening. And so I think it's very important we learn from those jurisdictions, and we're learning in a micro way about how various industries operate and all those things. But in a macro way, two things have been true in every jurisdiction that is reopened. The first has been that there are reoccurrences or flash-ups of COVID. So we can't believe that it is all going to be a downward trend. We know that there is going to be bumps in the road, and that's why we are being so purposeful with our public health. That is why we are planning so carefully to make sure acute care space is kept open. That's why we are being so disciplined, all of us trying to be. I know it's hard, but about how we approach these things, because we need to be able to handle those flare-ups, because otherwise we have to go backwards, and we don't want to go backwards in terms of the economic opening. So we know two things. The first is that there will be flare-ups, and we need the health capacity to handle them. And the second we know is that fewer people come back, at least initially, than expected. And this has been the case around the world. And I know that many of you will know this intuitively, but there's a tendency in government sometimes to think, oh, we just turn things off and on, right? We flick a switch and everything can go back. There is no place in the world where that has happened, because people have been hearing, depending on where they are, but for months on ends, about the danger of this virus. And there, in fact, is danger associated with this virus. I mean, we have tragically had 2,500 Ontarians die as a result of this. So 5,000 in Quebec, you know, and across the border in New York State, which, when all of us have been there, know is not that different than Ontario, many, many times that. So there is real anxiety for people. And I think that we need to collectively address that by making sure government does its part, by making sure businesses and organizations do their part, not to tell people, you know, falsely that, you know, everything's okay now, just go back to normal, but to be mindful of the economic impacts if we have to be, but move in that steady way so we can keep the momentum going as we learn our way through this. So Mr. Mayor, I don't want to take up all the time, and I do want to hear from people. I'm happy to make a few comments at the end, and I'm very happy to answer questions, but I'd really love to hear from the participants today to understand better what we need to be understanding. And again, thank you to you, and thank you to Will for putting this together.
Well, thank you, Minister. I think you'd be pleased to hear that our Economic Recovery Task Force plan does try to balance that between protecting people's health and safety, but also giving people confidence that when businesses reopen, that we've done our best to make sure businesses are operating in a health and safe manner. So the first question is coming to us from Heather Vanner. Heather Vanner is the Executive Director of Community Resource Center, known primarily for the Brantford Food Bank, which they operate, and they received $100,000 of the social service assistance funding that we received from the province, about $970,000 in total. So thank you very much for that. So her question is, many nonprofit and charitable organizations have not been able to fundraise and have been financially impacted during the COVID-19 crisis. Many are also concerned what will happen to their fundraising capabilities during a significant economic downturn. They're concerned about significant impact on their ability to keep their organizations operational beyond this crisis. Has the province considered providing sustainable funding for organizations that have been affected financially?
So Heather, first of all, thank you for the work that you've been doing. And it has just been amazing to see how the infrastructure, that social service infrastructure, the voluntary part of our economy, that was my phone quacking, just so you know, a duck didn't fly by. But that very important infrastructure has been working and stepping up in difficult times. Heather, we are looking obviously at providing support. We have provided provincially through our municipal partners because they have the more integrated community relationships. But I have heard this from the Ontario Association of Not-for-Profits. I've heard the things that you're talking about, both in terms of fundraising capacity. And so we're very much looking at what do we need to do to make sure that those kinds of vital organizations like yours are get through to the other side. I can say as well that this is a conversation we've been having nationally. The finance minister federally, Bill Morneau, hosts a call with all of the finance ministers, and at that table as well, we've talked about that again, how to partner, and also something that's coming up with the large urban mayors. So we understand the importance of it. We do understand the gap that's being caused in terms of people's ability to fundraise. A lot of really generous people are stepping up, but it's something that is on our agenda. So thank you.
And her second question, Minister, and in fact, her organization is an Employment Ontario service provider, and she knows the impact the crisis had on very significantly on small and medium-sized businesses. She wonders, will there be anything available to employers, especially smaller employers, beyond what is currently in place to assist in the hire back of employees who've been having to take a layoff or a leave of absence?
So this is one of the very complicated parts, and again, I'll be interested in the feedback I get today on, obviously, the federal government, the provincial government have put in a variety of programs, some of which were meant to be stopgaps, CERB program to support people because of the significant number of people going out to work. But there's absolutely an understanding, certainly by the province, that over time, we need to be able to sustain those programs because we're going to want people move back into the workforce, and that many businesses aren't going to be in a position because they haven't had any cash flow for a period of time to do that. So that was why we collectively worked together, all the provincial ministers, on the program to provide that payroll support. There are a number of other supports related to loans and such, and things as well that the provincial government is doing. But I think there is going to be this interesting challenge as to when it makes sense for us to be able to come out of the one program and move into the other. As you all know, different sectors have been affected differently. Our hospitality and entertainment sector has been hit very, very hard just by the reality of not being able to get people together, which is at the basis of that sector. So some of those sectors are going to have longer lasting issues, and maybe more importantly, the people who work there are going to have longer lasting issues, as opposed to some sectors which, as we open up, I mean, I know my barber is going to be very busy when he's able to open, and I think he'll work as many hours of the day as he can stay awake. So he'll have a different kind of problem. So, anyways, the program design is meant to understand the situation. And the one thing I'll just close with, and this I probably should have said at the beginning, is if there's anything that this COVID-19 has taught us about, is to be a bit humble. So we haven't ever had to turn on an economy again. We hadn't had to turn one off either. So we're living and learning as we do that, and we want to get as much of it right as we can. We won't get everything right, but we know that those businesses will need that support. And again, there's other programs I can speak to specifically if you'd like.
Right, so the next question is coming from private industry. It's from Fabrizio Secco, who is the president of the Canadian Ferrero Canada Ltd, this city's largest employer. I'm sure you're quite familiar with some of their products. Although Premier Ford has continued to, this is question, although Premier Ford has continued to say that Ontario will become self-sufficient from a domestic manufacturing perspective, has this been considered to be coupled with a strong trade agenda to ensure that Ontario can draw international investment?
Fabrizio, it's a great question. The Premier, and those of you who met him will know, and it has been very fortunate for us, he comes out of a manufacturing background. And so he has a very strong tie, but also importantly, a very strong understanding of the nature of both domestic production and integrated supply chains. I remember the first day that we stood up at the podium with Christine Elliott and myself, he started talking about supply chains. I don't think, I wonder how many people knew as much about supply chains as they know now. It became a very vital part of the response that we had. So Fabrizio, we are particularly committed. I would say we will ensure that when it comes to the vital supports that we need from a pandemic response perspective, whether that's PPE, or whether that's some other related pharmaceuticals and other things that are going to become important. The Premier said it, and I'd say it, we're not going to be back in the situation where we have a problem from a cross-border perspective. We simply can't be. Different ways to prepare for that, but a big part of that is going to be building capacity in those areas, and we've done that. There's over 40 companies now that are producing those products that weren't before, and that's to the ingenuity and inventiveness of the people of Ontario. Government doesn't do that, the businesses do. in the broader scheme, nobody has a crystal ball, but my belief is that we're going to be looking, we as in businesses like yourself, at the nature of our integrated supply chains. I've certainly had a number of conversations cross-border and with my US counterparts who see now even more the value, despite the little blip of not being able to get things across the border, on PPE. The cross-border work has continued and transportation has continued from a industrial perspective where those industries were essential. So I think we may see an even tighter integration of supply chains closer to home. And of course, there's going to be international opportunities and global opportunities. But my prediction is that we're going to see a consolidation of some supply chains that are going to have a more North American, maybe even a more regional component. But that'll finally be driven by a number of factors and features that we don't control right now, including the opening of borders and other matters. So we're keenly aware of it, particularly with the new trade agreement. I'll add one more thing, Mr. Mayor. You know, the idea of the cross-border opportunity within Canada, I think, is something that I can tell you all of the premiers are much more alive to now. The reality of self-sufficiency on a Canadian basis is a much more live conversation. And that's something that I think many of us have said for a long time needs to be dealt with, and I think it will be.
Thank you. So the next question comes to you from Linda Parker. Linda, you might just wave. Linda's with Six Nations Polytech, which is located here in Brantford, a very unique form of post-secondary education that has very much of an Indigenous background and perspective to it. So anyways, Linda's question is, given the continued high demand for skilled trades in the country, particularly the Grand Erie region, the city of Brantford and the county of Brant, Six Nations Polytech joined the Skilled Trades Alliance of Brantford, Brant, Six Nations in 2015, where we're working collaboratively. Six Nations Polytech, an Indigenous owned and controlled educational institute, recently applied for and received training delivery agent status in 3 trades at their leased facility in Brantford. And they've got the physical space to add much more. I've had a tour, and that's quite correct. So given the anticipated new and additional demands in apprenticeship and skilled trades for upskilling, reskilling, and micro-credentialing to support labor market demand, and that shift we know that's going to happen through this COVID-19 pandemic, are economic recovery stimulus packages considering the ability to assist in the acquisition of capital assets specifically to promote skilled trades and apprenticeship?
Great question, Linda. We dedicated in the March, we did it for some might not know, but instead of doing a full year budget, many of the governments in Canada still haven't done budgets or used their old budget. We put out a 1-year financial statement or a kind of mini budget for the year on March 25th so that we could adapt and acknowledge the change that had happened in the economy. In that, there was over $100 million of specific and targeted funding around expansion in the apprenticeship sector. And an element of that, and I don't want to get the number wrong, but was related to what you just talked about, which is the actual equipment and capital component. We were, I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but we had come off in 2019, the largest year of job growth in the history of Ontario. So over 200,000 jobs, more jobs were created in Ontario last year than had ever been in its history. And as the question pointed out, there's a skills shortage associated with that, in addition to the fact that jobs have been created, of well over 100,000 skilled trades positions through a variety of skills, including IT, but right through the full trade matrix. So Monty McNaughton, who's our minister, has a specific focus on this. We have not lost track of that initiative. I will have a full budget in November. I imagine that at that time, there'll be some more dedicated announcements that we'll be able to make in that regard. Right now, Minister McNaughton is very busy in terms of working on the labor guidance for all the reopenings of the various businesses, but we do anticipate that as the economy comes up and there's various trajectories it could take, we're going to fall back into this skills shortage issue. And quite frankly, the ability to attract skills cross-border, which had been a strength of Ontario's, and we hope will be a strength again, may be inhibited depending on international travel and the ability to bring in people. So that'll put even more pressure on the ability for us to deliver, domestically trained skilled workers, particularly in the micro-credentialing, which is going to be so important because of the shifts that I believe are going to happen in the economy, some subtle, some not so subtle, as the businesses reopen, but perhaps with a post-COVID, worldview.
Next question comes from Heidi Northwood. Heidi, if you might put your hand up. Heidi is the administrative head of Wilfrid Laurier University Brantford campus. And we have a tremendous partnership with Laurier going back 20 years, a great catalyst to economic recovery in our downtown Brantford. So we speak to Heidi almost on a bi-weekly basis about what we can do together to assist in the economic recovery of Brantford, which from their perspective is getting students back, growing our enrollment, supporting an entrepreneur collective, which Laurier is doing here. As kind of a business incubator that's going to be done here. So the request is, or the question is, do you see any other ways that Laurier, and I suppose could be other universities, specifically and in general, can play a role in the economic recovery of their host communities?
Let's just talk about Laurier because it's my alma mater, and we don't have to worry.
I thought you might be interested in that.
Yeah, we won't share this with the other universities. I would just say quite seriously, I did and have had a number of great conversations with the Council of University Presidents. And I have to say, boy, what a bunch of leaders in terms of identifying as one of their first tasks, the support for their communities at a time when they've got some pressures as well. And I've seen there's quite remarkable numbers, and Heidi be quite aware of them, but the impact that students have on various communities that they're in, the economic impact is well known to people who have businesses in those communities. And of course, we are looking, with some uncertainty at what that's going to look like in the immediate future, and what will September look like, and what will the next term look like. Specifically, I think the question before about micro-skilling and the question before about how we are able to, in a targeted local way, and I will include our community colleges in this, be agile to be able to support what are going to be some changing workforce needs. I think the other platform I'll talk about is we don't know how long this situation is going to go on, and we don't want really valuable people to be idle unduly, but the reality is that because of the roles that they're in, it's possible that they may be idle for longer periods of time than we'd like. And I think, and I said this to the university presidents and to the college presidents, the ability to provide time limited, but activities and support for people in terms of being able to say, what can I do? Like, what can I creatively do, especially given the constraints? But it's been amazing what our universities have done in terms of online capacity in no time, like literally in a matter of weeks, what should have by all means taken months, if not longer. But the ability to target people into some useful education, or even just some interesting education. Right? Now might be that time that I always wanted to complete that philosophy degree, if only I had the time. But I'm just saying, I think it could be vital to provide that support locally and to provide that conduit, and to probably need to look at business models that are flexible to the fact that a lot of these people are going to be in a difficult stance, and that's something we could be pleased to work with you on. But I think it's the micro piece of helping the economy adapt and change and being aware of that. And the second piece would be support for those that are going to be idle longer than we'd like them to be. But this doesn't have to be unproductive time. And I should say, Laurier and there's a couple other universities I showed out, have already done some great things in that regard. Most of what I do is just look at what people do and then say it's a good idea. So.
I know your time is running out. One more quick question for you. It comes from David Prang, who's the executive director of our Chamber of Commerce Brantford branch. David, you give a big wave there. It's a very quick question. Is the government considering implementing the 10-day sick day provision as proposed by the Prime Minister on May 25th? And is there going to be a process for consultation with businesses, especially small businesses, about the unintended consequences of COVID-19?
We think that we understand that making sure that employees feel safe in their workplace and don't have to be at work if they don't feel safe because of COVID. We went through this. We passed a law to make sure that people could step away from their work and not be in a position to lose their employment. But we don't think, and the Premier said that is the priority right now. We are concerned about the added cost that would represent, and it's very dynamic. The Prime Minister has talked about the federal government being prospectively interested in supporting that. So, we always are open to the conversations, and we're working very creatively with them. But we also know that businesses are going to be going through a very challenging time, and that they will need, to the best of their ability, to ensure that the workforce they have is able to be there and be working. On the flip side, and I've talked extensively with some of our health leaders about this, all of us are going to, I think there's sort of a Canadian thing to some extent about, we have the sniffles or we have something and like that kind of working through it, issue may well not be appropriate in this setting, but we have so many other options when it comes to work from home and other options and creative ways to look at it. So we've certainly said, as always, we will talk to the federal government. We are concerned about the impacts on employers. We would, of course, if it's not something that the federal government tries to overlay, we always would talk to businesses about the impacts, because there's just, good idea. Wouldn't say it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's what are our priorities. When it comes to public money, we think things like long-term care, we think things like preserving our healthcare system and testing and other things are important. And when it comes to private dollars, we know that employers are going to be quite stretched, and their ability to fund something like this would be challenging at a time like this.
Thank you. So I think we're drawing to the end of our half hour, but I know that first I wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to introduce and thank our MPP, Will Boma, that have been helping us to arrange this. I've had I've had an excellent relationship as mayor with our MPP. We work together on a number of different initiatives, and I truly value the assistance that he provides to myself and our city. So Will, did you want to make a few comments before the minister has to leave us?
Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it. I do apologize for coming late. It's one of those instances where someone calls and says, I just got a bug in my eye, and can you have a look at it yet? And then they're a ways away, and here I am. But I wanted to just echo what Kevin has said about our working relationship. I mean, we talk, 2-3 times a week about what's going on and how to best solve that. And where you really see those that relationship strengthening is just in how we've been able to respond with the COVID thing, whether it's supporting the food bank and getting those monies flowing, keeping the soup kitchens aligned and working in the right direction, and to everything else that's been going on in the riding this week, which I will leave alone. On the flip side, since I've been able to get this job, probably one of the greatest things has been all the incredible people that I've been able to meet. And when I've met Minister Phillips, he's immediately struck me and continued to be receptive to listening to what's going on with caucus and actually implementing those things, the good suggestions that people have. And it's just been an absolute pleasure being able to work with him in so many things. Otherwise, thanks everyone for being here today. And I'd really like to thank the City of Brantford for their leadership and as far as the Economic Recovery Task Force. And that's why when I found out about this meeting, I'm like, it would be really, really great if we could get the minister on the line just to hear what everyone has to say, and just to be here, because I know that the leadership that we have here is capable of bringing some of those excellent ideas forward. And I'm assuming it's probably just because of the incredible training that the minister received at Laurier, obviously, right, Heidi? And so I think that's where that comes from. But thanks everyone for being here today. And I'll hand it back over to Kevin.
Lastly, then, once again, I want to thank you, Minister Phillips, for being here. I think we're going to send your Economic Recovery Task Force plan. We hope to be approved by Council June 23rd. As a former business CEO, CAO, I think you're going to be very impressed with how specific it is, how it's going to have metrics and assignments to various stakeholders to complete. And we hope that it will be one of the better Economic Recovery Task Force plans in the province.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you all for the time today. I always, if I get a chance, I am very optimistic. I mean, I can tell you it's been quite a busy for everybody, all of us, very, very busy time as each of you have had to adapt and such. But every day I see improvement on how our health system is dealing with COVID. I wish if you could all just see one thing with me, I wish you could see some of the people I meet, the researchers and the scientists that are working, yes, on vaccines, but also on treatments, antivirals and things, some of the smartest people in the world. And they're right here in Ontario, and they're going to make this easier, and those things are coming sooner than a vaccine, and that's really going to help. But principally it's because I get the chance sometimes a couple times a day to talk to people like yourselves who are doing this and adapting and being resilient and figuring out how to approach these things. So I am enormously optimistic about where we're going to end up, not sugarcoating where we are. It's difficult, but we are going to come through this together. And again, Will, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of you, thank you for your leadership and the time today.
Great. Thanks again. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So, see. Is he moving off?
I'm trying. Don't,
You get-
I've
Okay.
learned a couple of things.
Get out of here, Minister Phil.
All right, I'm gone now. Okay.
Okay.
Bye,
you.
everybody.
All right, I hope that was informative for everybody. And again, unless anybody, while we had that hour break, do you have any, because this is a fairly, I like this to be a fairly fluid committee. It's an idea committee as well. At least right now it's idea generation, but it will soon be execution. Again, if you have any ideas or suggestions for our task force spreadsheet, please pass them on. Members of the public, please advantagebrantford.ca. You'll find it there. Anybody wants to make have any further thoughts about some of the specifics of our recovery task plan? Put your hand up now. Probably not late Friday afternoon. I wouldn't think so. So again, please send us any further written comments you had. For those that had questions, I tried to mix it up and make sure that we distributed as best we could. But fortunately, we at least had this opportunity for half an hour with the minister, and that was, I think, helpful and informative. So everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see the members of the working group next Wednesday at I believe 2:30 p.m. And ourselves will be the following week at the date of that June 19th. So everybody have a great weekend. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bye, everyone.